What if I told you that one of America's proudest scientific inventions was first tested on a man? A man who sat calmly in a wooden chair, surrounded by scientists, reporters, and prison guards, all waiting to see if a machine could kill more humanely than a rope. They called it progress, but what happened next shocked the world, horrified witnesses, and exposed a side of human ambition that no one wanted to see. Because behind the invention of the electric chair wasn't compassion. It was revenge, profit, and power. And at the centre of it all stood two of the greatest geniuses in history, Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla, locked in a battle that turned science into a weapon. This is the story of how the race to light up the world created one of the darkest machines ever built. Dawn broke over Auburn Prison, New York on August 6, 1890. The air was still. The corridors were quiet. Inside one of the cells, William Kemmler opened his eyes for the last time. He didn't scream. He didn't pray. He simply rose, straightened his black suit, and began to prepare, as if it were any other morning. The guards served him his final meal, meat, eggs, and bread. He ate every bite calmly, the priest whispering prayers beside him. At 6 a.m. the barber arrived to shave him. Each stroke of the razor was gentle, precise, a strange act of care for a man hours from death. To those watching, it almost looked like ritual, not preparation for execution. Then came the walk. Down the cold hallway, past the locked iron doors, into the small chamber where 17 witnesses waited. Scientists, journalists, state officials, all eager, nervous, pretending this was an experiment instead of an execution. When Kemmler entered, the room fell silent. He looked at the chair, a crude wooden frame fitted with leather straps and copper wires. Without fear, he said, "Gentlemen, I wish you good luck. I believe I'm going to a better place. And I'm ready." They asked him to sit. Then to stand again. They needed to cut open the back of his suit to attach the wires. The air thickened with dread. Finally, he sat down. Straps tightened around his wrists, ankles, chest, and waist. A metal cap was fixed to his head. Kemmler took one last breath and whispered, "Do it right. I'm not in a hurry." And with that, the switch was flipped. The switch dropped. 1,000 volts of electricity tore through William Kemmler's body. His back arched, his fists clenched, and then silence. For 17 seconds, no one moved. Dr. Edward Spitzker, the neurologist overseeing the execution, stepped forward, checked the pulse, and announced, "He's dead." But he wasn't. A faint, guttural sound broke the stillness, a sound no one expected to hear from a dead man. Witnesses froze. Then came the gasps. Kemmler was still breathing. Panic erupted in the chamber. Guards shouted. The warden barked orders. Someone yelled to, "Turn it back on!" The current surged again, this time to 2,000 volts. What followed was horror. Blood seeped from Kemmler's nose. The smell of burnt flesh filled the air. Smoke began to rise from his head. A few witnesses turned away. Others tried to run, but the doors were locked. No one could leave. They were trapped, forced to watch science cross the line into torture. For 8 excruciating minutes, the scene dragged on. When it was finally over, the room fell into stunned silence. A reporter for the New York Times would later write, "And you call this humane? This is far worse than hanging George Westinghouse." When asked what he thought, simply said, "They could have done better with an axe." Everyone in that room believed they had just witnessed the first and last use of the electric chair. But they were wrong. because what happened in that chamber was only the beginning. The birth of a machine born from fear, greed, and a war between two of history's greatest minds. To understand how the electric chair was born, you have to understand the war that powered it. A war not fought with guns or armies, but with currents. At the end of the 19th century, two of the brightest minds on Earth were racing to control the future of electricity. Thomas Edison, the celebrated inventor who gave light to the world, championed direct current, or DC, steady, predictable, and most importantly, his. But across the country, Nikola Tesla, a visionary immigrant with ideas decades ahead of his time, had built something different: alternating current, or AC. It was more efficient, more powerful, and a direct threat to Edison's empire. What began as a scientific disagreement soon turned into an all-out propaganda war. Edison couldn't stop Tesla's technology, so he set out to destroy its reputation. He called AC dangerous, uncontrollable, deadly. But words alone weren't enough. Edison needed proof. Proof that would terrify the public. And so the demonstrations began. Before crowds of horrified onlookers, animals were electrocuted with Tesla's alternating current. Dogs, calves, even an elephant named Topsy. Edison's message was clear. If AC can kill them, imagine what it will do to you. The irony was cruel. Edison claimed he wanted to protect the public, but in truth, he wanted to protect his business. He didn't care how gruesome it looked, as long as it made people fear Tesla's current. Then came the perfect opportunity. A new law in New York demanded a more humane form of execution. Edison saw his chance. If the government used alternating current for the electric chair, the public would forever associate Tesla's invention with death. And it worked. Tesla would go on to win the technological war. AC became the power system that lights up our world today. But the electric chair remained Edison's hidden victory. A dark reminder that sometimes innovation isn't driven by progress, but by revenge. While Edison and Tesla were waging their invisible war over wires and currents, another man watched from the sidelines. A dentist named Albert Southwick from Buffalo, New York. One night, Southwick witnessed a drunken man accidentally touch a live generator. The man died instantly. No pain, no struggle, just silence. To Southwick, that moment wasn't horror. It was revelation. He believed electricity could make death clean, quick, and humane. If it could kill instantly, he thought, maybe it could replace the hangman's rope, the symbol of a brutal and clumsy past. Southwick began experimenting. He tested on animals, publishing papers and sharing his findings with lawmakers who were desperate for a modern solution to the death penalty. Among them was Senator David McMillan, a staunch supporter of capital punishment, who saw Southwick's idea as a political gift. At a time when reformers were calling for abolition, Macmillan could now say, "We don't need to end executions, we just need to make them humane." And so, in 1886, a special committee was formed to find a more civilized way to kill. After months of study, they released a 95-page report with a chilling conclusion. Electrocution was the most efficient and humane method of execution. Governor David Bennett Hill signed the law on June 5, 1888. It would take effect the following year, and the first electric chair was ordered to be built inside Auburn Prison. But behind that so-called humane innovation, something darker was happening. In the summer of 1888, a mysterious name began to appear in the newspapers: Harold P. Brown, an electrical engineer who warned the public about the deadly dangers of alternating current. His articles described AC as a menace to human life, claiming it could kill instantly with just a touch. People believed him. But what they didn't know was that Harold Brown wasn't acting alone. He had once worked for Thomas Edison, and now many suspected he was still working for him. Brown's public crusade quickly turned into a series of gruesome experiments. He began electrocuting animals, dozens of dogs, cats, even horses, to prove how deadly alternating current really was. Edison quietly supplied the equipment. Together, they were building a case, not for science, but for fear. When George Westinghouse, Tesla's business partner, realized what they were doing, he refused to sell Brown any AC generators. But that didn't stop them. Brown found old, second-hand equipment and continued his experiments in secret laboratories, documenting every spasm, every scream, every puff of smoke as scientific evidence. Then came the next step, the one that would seal alternating current's reputation. Edison appeared before the state's Committee on Humane Execution and declared that death by electrocution was instantaneous and painless, especially if alternating current was used. He spoke not as a businessman, but as a national hero, the man who brought light to the world. And the committee believed him. But there was another proposal on the table: poison. Some argued that a chemical injection would be quieter, cleaner, even more humane. Yet the idea was quickly rejected. Why? Because it would require doctors to take part, and physicians were bound by their oath to do no harm. Edison knew this. He also knew that electricity, the very thing he claimed to control, was the perfect alternative. In the end, the committee made its choice. Harold Brown was hired as the chief engineer to design a wooden chair that could end a life with a flick of a switch. The law took effect on January 1st, 1889, and within months, the first electric chair stood waiting inside Auburn Prison. A monument to science, ambition, and deceit. They said it would be quick. They said it would be painless. But William Kemmler's death would prove just how wrong they were. After William Kemmler's execution, the world was horrified. Reporters called it barbaric. Scientists called it a failure. But instead of ending the experiment, America doubled down. Within a few years, other states began to follow New York's lead. Ohio adopted the electric chair in 1896, Massachusetts in 1898, New Jersey in 1906, North Carolina in 1910. The idea spread across the country like wildfire, or like a disease people chose to ignore. To the public, it was progress. The newspapers called it modern justice. Politicians called it humane. And prison wardens called it efficient. No more hanging mishaps, no more public outrage, just a quiet room, a chair, and a switch. But behind the curtain, the reality was far uglier. Failures kept happening. Botched executions that left inmates smoking, convulsing, sometimes burning alive while witnesses looked on in horror. Each time, the same excuse was repeated: a technical error. No one wanted to admit that the problem wasn't the machine. It was the idea itself. Over the next century, more than 4,000 people would die in the electric chair. Serial killers, mob bosses, drifters and innocents alike, all reduced to the same final moment: a flash of light and the smell of smoke. And even after lethal injection was introduced, the chair never truly disappeared. 8 US states still keep it as an option. A relic waiting in the corner, its wood polished, its straps oiled, as if death ever needed maintenance. The last person to die in it was Robert Gleason, executed in Virginia in 2013. He chose the chair himself, maybe as a statement, maybe out of defiance. But his death proved one thing: the electric chair was still alive in America's justice system, more than a century after it was supposed to end. And yet one question still lingers, one that no one dares to ask out loud. What does a person actually feel when 2,000 volts tear through their body? So what really happens when the switch is thrown? To the witnesses, it looks like a flash of light and a single jolt. But inside the body, electricity moves at nearly the speed of thought. For a fraction of a second, billions of tiny electrical signals in the brain all fire at once. Every nerve, every muscle, every reflex exploding in confusion. The nervous system short-circuits. Consciousness disappears almost instantly, long before the body can register pain. That's the theory. In a perfect execution, the brain shuts down in less than the blink of an eye. The heart stops soon after, the lungs seize, and everything goes still. It's over before the mind can even realise what's happening. But perfection is rare. If the sponges under the electrodes are too dry, the current scorches the skin instead of passing cleanly through. If the contact points aren't placed correctly, the electricity arcs, jumps, between metal and flesh. When that happens, the shock doesn't end life instantly. It crawls through it. The body may remain conscious for seconds that feel like forever. In some cases, a faint heartbeat continues after the first jolt. Executioners are forced to flip the switch again and again until silence finally returns. Every extra pulse of current means another chance for suffering. It's this terrifying unpredictability that turned many states against the electric chair. Science promised control. What it delivered was chaos disguised as precision. The electric chair was supposed to represent progress, a sign that science could make even death more humane. But what it really revealed was something far older and darker: humanity's endless talent for turning compassion into control. Every person involved believed they were doing the right thing. Albert Southwick thought he was sparing people from the noose. Politicians saw a cleaner image of justice. Edison saw a way to win a business war. Each one convinced themselves that cruelty could be disguised as mercy if it looked technical enough, scientific enough, civilized enough. And for more than a century, that illusion worked. The electric chair became an icon, carved into history, photographed, filmed, even romanticized. A machine meant to kill quickly, turned into a mirror, reflecting everything we don't want to see about ourselves. Because in the end, the electric chair isn't just about how people died. It's about what we were willing to believe to make their deaths feel acceptable. Progress didn't make death humane. It only made it easier to look away. A century ago, the electric chair was hailed as a triumph of modern civilization, proof that humanity could make even death scientific, efficient, and humane. But history tells a different story. Behind the polished wood and shining metal was fear. Behind every claim of mercy was a motive: profit, pride, or power. And every time that switch was flipped, it reminded the world that no matter how advanced we become, our inventions still carry the fingerprints of the people who build them. The electric chair didn't just kill, it revealed us, our need to control, to justify, to turn horror into progress. Maybe that's why its story still shocks us today, because it forces us to ask a question that science alone can't answer. Can death ever truly be humane? Or is that just another illusion we create to live with what we've done?